Hello, welcome back to Dragon Dreams. I'm Ivan. Today I'm going to continue what I learned from DMing BECMI. This is part 2, and the topic for today is tips for new BECMI DMs. Stay tuned. Tip 1. The rules are made for the players in the DM, not the players in the DM for the rules. So this is all important to OSR and old school D&D. I think the concept was that the rules are there to be kind of these guidelines. They're sort of like the DM is the ultimate arbiter of the rules, but you're empowered as a DM to make little tweaks, have little house rules, stuff like that. And the concept is to make this feeling of immersion in a fantasy setting where you're on a heroic quest and your heroes are doing things, and it should sort of feel like kind of realistic in a certain sense. I mean, obviously not realistic in the sense of the magic part, but the fantasy part. But I mean, it should have this feeling of fidelity, that the being in the setting, inhabiting the setting, should feel like what you do matters in a logical way, right? I think that was the original intent of it. Otherwise, you just have like a dice game or a card game or a board game, and you just have rules. And you wouldn't have a DM, okay? So bear that in mind, because my feeling is that one of the huge differences between old school and new school is that WotC somehow sort of reframed Dungeons and Dragons, I feel like, from a perspective of like there's just rules and you follow them. That's kind of how I feel. Like, I don't know, somebody in the comments I'm sure will probably say no, that's not actually true. But that's how I feel. That's the feeling I get when I read WotC D&D rules. Whereas when I read the old school D&D rules, there's this real sense that they keep on saying, these are your rules. You can change them. This is optional. You can, mix stuff around and do what makes sense to you. That being said, it's good to have enough experience with the rules as written to know how they work. So don't just go totally crazy and just change everything before you know how things work. Have some experience with that. But I'm also going to tell you some other tips for things that I typically do when I run. Tip 2. BECMI is a lot deadlier than WotC D&D. Okay, the hit point scale is lower. Like, magic users and thieves are both D4 for hit dice. All right, clerics are D6, fighters are D8. So keep that in mind. And you die at 0 hit points. More on this in just a second, but just bear in mind, and there's no saving throws where you make 3 saving throws to survive, and if or 3 saving throws to die or whatever. There's none of that. It's like, if you're at 0 hit points, you're dead, period, make a new character. Okay, so bear that in mind, that this is a deadly game in which your PCs can and may very well die in the course of the adventures. Tip 3. In your session 0, talk to your players about OSR play. There's a gazillion blog posts and videos on this. You might send some of those their way, but here are the highlights for me. Old school D&D is about thinking outside the box. It's so different, I feel like, than the WotC feel, which is more about using the rules to win. This is more about, if you're using the rules to win, you're doing it wrong. The best BECMI players are the ones who think outside the box, all right? if you need to fight, you fight. If you need to use the rules, you use the rules. But you don't want to just rely on the ability of your fighter to hit the orcs with a longsword, the ability of your magic user to cast sleep. You want to use everything at your disposal, and that brings me to the next point, which is tell your players they can try anything. The way I do this is if a player says something like, could I swing from a chandelier and like kick the guard in the face or something, I'll tell them how I'm going to rule on that. Then I'll say, do you want to do that? And if they want to do that, we'll roll the dice just the way I said. Or if they say, nah, that sounds too hard, I think I'm going to do something else. I think I'm just going to swing my longsword at the guard. Then, okay, great, you can do that. Okay, and I would encourage them to come up with clever plans, like tell them this in session 0. I'd encourage them to use the environment to their advantage, etc., to win through. And I'd also be having the monsters and NPCs use the environment to their advantage. This is a very tactical game. So it's really fun and it comes to life and it pops when, the orcs are like hiding behind crates and like shooting crossbows at them and like, they know where the secret doors are and they're popping out and ambushing them and, getting them from both sides and all that. And then the players react and come up with some cool plan where they're like, I don't know what, like I'm going to, knock that wine barrel over and roll it at the orcs or something. Okay, so, and tell them also not to just rely on their class abilities. Classes are very simple in this game. And one of the things that actually is kind of a turnoff for me with WotC is WotC likes to give classes like a gajillion different powers. Like every single level you get some cool thing, fighters get all these feats. It's not that way in BECMI. Like fighters are just good at fighting. They're just better at fighting than anybody else. And most of the time, rules as written, they're just gonna be like, I swing my longsword. That's it. But fighters can do so much more. Every single character can do so much more if they just think in terms of, I'm actually in this fantasy world. What could I do in this situation that would be awesome? Is there some way we could I don't know, get the jump on these guys? Is there some way we can distract them? Is there some way we can, I don't know what, let them think of cool stuff to do and then let them, have a fair chance of succeeding if it's a good plan. Tip 4. By the same token, you as the DM can do anything. Now, you got to keep it fair. You have to take responsibility for that power. And don't go totally hog wild. I mean, don't totally break the rules. But you're empowered to make up your own monsters or your own variants on monsters. You're empowered to come up with your own magic items. You can have weird magic additions. I mean, the old modules had all sorts of really weird, bizarre stuff that's not actually in the rules. So it's if you want to have some weird, magic art that has some magic power that, is dripping blood, and if the blood touches anybody, they, I don't know, grow a third arm or something. You can do that. The main thing is keep it fair and keep it interesting. All right, and don't go so hog wild that you're not playing D&D anymore. Tip 5, give them a fighting chance. So here's the first thing I do to give them a fighting chance. I'd start them out with maybe 1 healing potion per PC. And don't give them a ready access to healing potions, though. Have it be this once-in-a-way thing that you can control so that you could give them more healing potions later, maybe, if they're lucky. So, have something they find an old witch woman's hut in the woods, and the witch woman beckons to you, and if they come in, she says, I have foreseen your coming in the cards. I feel that I need to give you these healing potions, and then she's prepared exactly enough healing potions for one person to have a healing potion each. And then if they go back there another time, the hut's gone or whatever, right? But you could always have them encounter her again. Maybe the hut moves, who knows? Or something else. Maybe they find the healing potions early on, maybe there's a kobold lair early on in the dungeon and there's healing potions in the first treasure supply they find. Something like that, right? And then while we're on the topic of hit points, a couple of other things about hit points. One is I would let them start out with max hit points. That's not what it says in the rules, but that's what we all did back in the old days. Okay. And I let them go a little bit negative. So my rule is that the negative number they can go to is equal to their level, plus minus their con mod. Okay, but not worse than -1. Okay, like they can always, everybody can always go to -1. Okay, so let's say they're level 3, and let's say they have a constitution of 14, which in BECMI gives them a +1 to hit points, right? So that means they could go to -4. If they're below that, they're dead. End of that PC. Okay, unless they get resurrected or something, which is really rare. So I would allow them to go to that negative number, but they're bleeding out at 1 hit point per round until one of the PCs bandages them, or somebody in the party bandages them. So that means that somebody else has to give up their round, not attack an orc, and instead run over and bandage them or something, right? And then they're in a coma at 1 hit point per day, okay, until they're at 1 hit point again, okay? And at that point, they come out of the coma. Now, during that time, I do not let them be healed magically. Maybe if you want to be nice to them, you could say that a Cure Light Wounds will, like give them 1 hit point back. So there's 1 less day of rest that they need. But the thing to avoid here is don't let them pop back up, right? Like, there should definitely be a trip back to town if one of them goes negative. Now, if they go 0, exactly 0, I kind of consider them lucky, and I say, okay, you're lucky. You're just knocked out for 1d6 turns, all right? And a turn is approximately 10 minutes. It's an out-of-combat thing. And, so that's going to slow people down, but it's kind of like, yeah, you got lucky, So that kind of helps them deal with those really low hit points a little bit easier without making it absurdly easy, because it's not supposed to be easy. And continuing the theme of giving them a fighting chance, clerics in BECMI don't get spells until 2nd level. Okay? I'll let them cast 1 Cure Light Wounds a day at 1st level, just because I feel like you gotta let them heal people. Also, if you're using Rules Cyclopedia, there's a healing skill. So you might make players aware of that if you're using that optional rule, which will give them like a little bit, I think it's like a D3 hit points or something. Just a little bit of help in healing. Then another thing is I would start clerics off with maybe like a few vials of holy water from their church or something, so that way if they meet undead, they have cool stuff they can do. So it's not, I mean, they can turn undead, but it's still like, kind of start them out with a few little things that they can do that will kind of help them deal with undead. Okay. I'd also do a few things to take care of the party magic user. This is really important because party magic, 1st level magic users are really hard. They get a D4 hit points at 1st level. They cannot wear any armor. It's like the weapons that they have available to them are really slim pickings. It's not crossbows, by the way. They cannot use crossbows. It's like daggers and staves and stuff. So, a few tips for making it a little easier on the party magic user. One is let the party magic user start out or very early on gain some scrolls. So I would give them read magic, detect magic, maybe floating disc, maybe light, maybe like a few magic missiles, maybe some of the weird 1st level spells that they don't normally get to cast, like ventriloquism, something weird and nifty, but go for like nifty more than making them overpowered, right? Like I wouldn't necessarily give them like a sleep spell or a charm spell, maybe, but Don't just totally go hog wild with it, but give them kind of some nifty things. Give them some things to do, because first level magic users can only cast one first level spell once per day, and there's no cantrips, no 0th level spells in this game, okay? So the only cool thing the magic user gets to do at first level is that one spell, which is probably sleep. All right? So in addition, I would coach them on which spells to get at first level. Sleep, I think, is the most popular, because that's this area effect. It takes out a whole, bunch of combatants all at once. It's kind of like your get out of jail free card in D&D at first level. Now, another option, and let them choose what they want to do. Another option is Charm Person is a nice alternative that some people choose, which is because Charm Person lasts a really long time. Like, look it up in the spell description. It can last for like weeks or even months, depending on the intelligence of the character that's charmed. So it's one thing that's really nice about that is that as soon as they meet some guy, and it could even be like a maybe a higher powered guy, like a gnoll, maybe even an ogre. I think the way I read that spell, I interpret it that ogres are the largest humanoid that could be charmed. Some people might say no, but I would say yes, ogres can be charmed. And what's kind of cool about that is that if they use it wisely, they can get like some cool like bodyguard, basically, that's going to sort of like, soak up some damage for them. It's going to give them something they can do throughout the whole adventure. So they have like that gnoll or whoever that they charmed, who's like, thinks that they're their best friend and is running around with the party, like fighting the other bad guys, which I think is really fun. And it sort of feels like, this is so cool. Like I get this thing that I can do throughout the whole day of adventuring, right? And I would also maybe give them a few cool little nifty items, like maybe from their teacher's alchemy lab. Maybe they have like a smoke bomb or like a little like oil slick thing they could like pour somewhere and it'll make guys slip. Or like some acid, like a vial of acid. Maybe they'll give them nifty things. Like, general rule for OSR is giving PCs nifty little things they could do that the players can figure out something interesting to work with is gold. Okay, so give them nifty little things. Nothing too powerful. Don't give them like an actual bomb that's gonna blow up and do mass damage or something. But give them, some nifty little thing. And notice that these things I'm suggesting are like one-shot items. Like once they use that, they don't have it. And don't let them just go back to the alchemy lab whenever they want. Like let them get it once. Or maybe have them encounter an alchemy lab early on in the adventure that has some of these things in it, so they have these nifty little things. But maybe make it like nobody else knows what these things are, but the magic user goes, "Oh yeah, I saw that in my teacher's alchemy lab. I know what that is." Right? And then the other thing is, I'll usually let them make an intelligence check to gain like little bits of information on whether an object is magical, and then a second roll to see if they know that it's magical, what they think it might do. Like maybe there's a sigil on it that does something, or the gemstone that's placed in a certain way means something. So that they might get a hint about magical items and objects that allows them to do something other than just cast that one spell, right? It's not as good as Detect Magic. It shouldn't be. Detect Magic lasts for a period of time. It's area effect. Make them make this skill check for each and every object that they do it. And again, they have to make it twice. If one to detect magic or determine that it's magical in the first place, and a second one to find out how it works. But kind of let them figure that out. It gives them a way to figure out what magic items they can use or what's magical without having to go back to town, and stuff like that. And and maybe coach them a little bit on some neat equipment items they can have, like flaming oil. They can use oil, so coach them like you could use flaming oil, you could use acid, you could use holy water, just things that make your guy a little bit more effective. Maybe they're like the cool items guy, like they have caltrops or something. Coach them on that so that there's always kind of like this bag of tricks that they have, magical or otherwise, that's like cool stuff the magic user can do. And maybe also coach them on things they can do in combat other than just throw daggers and cast spells, because like maybe they're the guy who's figuring out cool things that will help the rest of the party, right? Like maybe they're the guy that's like, I want to like topple this bookcase in front of the orcs so the orcs trip over it or something, and it buys us some time, stuff like that. Like maybe that might actually be a better thing than just throwing their one dagger, because let them do cool stuff, right? Tip 6. Okay, read a classic module from the old days. The top modules I recommend are Keep on the Borderlands and In Search of the Unknown. I'd recommend these for different reasons, all right? So Keep on the Borderlands is an excellent dungeon crawl. Now, it's mostly monster lairs and caves and stuff. There isn't necessarily that much like that's diverges from just a bunch of cave complexes and monster lairs, but it's extremely well done. It was written by Gary Gygax, one of the founders of D&D, and it shows you how to write an adventure. If you analyze that, you'll get really good ideas. You can also pull any one of those lairs, or several of them, out and just use that one cave complex and insert that as needed. So like if you want like a kobold lair, for instance, you could take the kobold lair from Keep on the Borderlands and like have them just find that one lair, or they want to save a village from a kobold invasion and they, go out and they find that, and that's the lair that you use. You could also run that adventure. It's a really great starting adventure. It was made to be a starting adventure. In Search of the Unknown is also a great one. The reason is that it was also made to be a teaching adventure. And In Search of the Unknown is great in certain ways that Keep on the Borderlands isn't so much. One way in which it's really good is it has a lot more magical stuff and weird tricks and weird, problems to solve, and like weird things that teleport you and do stuff and weird things to interact with that I feel like aren't showcased as much in Keep on the Borderlands. Like if you played Keep on the Borderlands, you might think that D&D is just about fighting monsters and running around in caves, but In Search of the Unknown really showcases how a dungeon can have weird magical stuff in it and weird stuff to interact with. It's not just necessarily fighting all the time. The other reason why I would highly recommend taking a look at that one is because you have to key it yourself for both the monsters and the treasure. And this is a really great exercise because, first of all, it will give you a sense of just like how to, do an adventure. You have a pre-made map, but you'll have a sense of, how to decide what monsters go where, so that you might decide like put kobolds and giant rats fairly toward the front of the dungeon so that they're encountered early at low levels, and then put higher, more powerful monsters later in the dungeon so that they're encountered when the guys have leveled up, or at least gotten a little more experience with it. It also has you determine what treasures are where, which is also really great. So it gives you some experience in doing that. And one thing that's really nice about this as well is that it's very adaptable to what you want to do in your campaign. So if you have a particular idea for what you want the first adventure to be, you can sort of modify In Search of the Unknown to kind of fit that niche, right? So, like I actually leveraged this tremendously in my recent BECMI campaign, where you'll see that there are these two guys, Rogan the fighter and Zeligar the magic user. Also, Rogan has a mistress named Melissa that's just like really briefly described. I sort of adapted that to the Mystara campaign setting, to where there's this concept in Karameikis where 100 years ago it wasn't Karameikis, it was just a bunch of little tiny kingdoms in among the people called the Traladarans. And so my concept was that Rogan was actually a Traladaran king from the old days, and he lived during the Thracian invasion, the invasion of the Thracian Empire, which ended up conquering that region. But my concept was that he and Zeligar, and Melissa's actually his queen, and that is also a cleric, is that those three, like, kind of use that as a hideout from the Thracian army. So that, like, kind of linked it in to the setting, and it gives you some sense of the history of your setting. So you can adapt these things to the setting that you're working with or the campaign that you want to run, right? You could dial them up or down to be good guys or bad guys, to be really roguish or really nice. I made them my villains, so these guys were like the villains throughout, like, the entire story arc. My concept is that they're still around, but they're undead. So I would really encourage you to take a look at some of these early modules, maybe even use them if you like them. You can get them on eBay. I mean, you can get the reprints. The WotC reprints are okay. The thing I don't like about them is that they have the maps at the back, whereas the originals had the maps on the inside cover, and the inside cover was made to be pulled out so that you'd have, like, just the adventure booklet and then the map, which should actually be used as a DM screen or one of your DM screens, which is a much better, much more easy way to use the adventure than the WotC reprints. And some of the WotC reprints, like, they're not really printed very well. Like, you can kind of see that they were just reprinting these old, scans. Whereas if you get them on eBay, that's kind of gold. That being said, the one good thing that you might do with the WotC reprint, the good thing about getting them on, like, drive-through or something, if you want to get the WotC reprints, is you can take the option of getting the PDFs, which will mean that you can easily, screen capture the maps and put them into, your VTT or things like that. So there are advantages to it, but I would not go with the Goodman Games ones that are made for 5e or DCC, because they've revamped them. They're like these really long adventures. The old adventures were really short and sweet. I would go with the originals for sure. Okay. But bottom line is, whether you use them or you take them apart and sort of use ideas from them or whatever, both of those introductory modules are really going to help you understand how to DM this game, okay? And there's also a third one that I'll recommend, by the way, and that is the Holmes Basic version of D&D, which is just a little bit earlier than BECMI. It came out in 1977. It's a great version. That has this, like, a one-page map and a one-page key for the map. For a sample adventure. Now, that adventure is referred to as the Tower of Xenopus because there's a wizard named Xenopus who has a tower in it. There's no actual title that the Holmes Basic version gives to that, but it's really an excellent starting adventure. So if you can get a hold of that, you can probably, if you don't want to get the Holmes Basic entire booklet, which I recommend getting, I think it's great, but if you don't get that version, I'm sure you can find it online, and there's actually somebody did like a souped up version that has a second level to it. You could probably find that online as well, which is really neat. I ran the whole thing and I thought it was a really, really neat, fun version of that adventure. So that's my recommendation on classic adventures. Tip 7. I would coach players who are new to BECMI for maybe the first 1 to 3 sessions, kind of feel that out, depending on how well they're doing and how much experience they're getting. I don't mean experience points, but how much, how much they're getting the lessons from experiencing the game, or how much experience they've had previously with an OSR. But after that, stop coaching them. Like, I'd say it's a little bit like, those Japanese RPGs where there's like a tutorial, and like the first adventure is kind of like tutorial-ish, and then after that, it just lets you play the game. Let them do what they want to do and make mistakes after you've coached them. And also don't force them to do anything. Like, let them, if they say, if they really want to do something, let them do it. They'll learn from their mistakes. But maybe for the first 1 to 3 sessions, as I said, like, just kind of coach them on, just a little bit. Don't tell them what to do, but just give them little hints, okay, about things they could do. Will make it a little bit easier on them. And finally, tip 8. Let the PCs die if the rules and your house rules say they die. So, like, if you're using rules as written, if they're at 0 hit points or less, they're dead. Okay? If your rules using, like, a house rule, like the house rule I recommended, where they can go a little bit negative, if they're, like, level 3, and the example that I gave, and they have a +1 bonus from their constitution, that means they can go to -4. If they go to -5, they're dead. Okay? If they get poisoned and fail a saving throw, they're dead. Now, you might want to telegraph that a little bit. Like, if there's a poisonous snake, you might hear it hissing when they walk into the room, or if they're examining things carefully or something. Should be like ways they could avoid having the snake jump out and bite them. But if they don't, and they fail their saving throw, they're dead. But look, tell the players ahead of time in your session 0. Listen, PC death is an opportunity to make a new character, right? Let them take the exact number of experience points they have. Let them make a new character with exactly that many experience points. And I say experience points, not levels, because in BECMI, different character classes have different experience point advancement, okay? So, like, thieves advance a lot faster than magic users, for instance. So, let's say they had enough experience points to have, like, a 3rd level thief, but it's only, like, a 2nd level magic user, and their thief dies. Say, okay, you have that much experience points, right? And maybe that allows you to make a 3rd level or thief or a 3rd level cleric, but maybe only like a 2nd level magic user or a 2nd level fighter or dwarf or something. Okay, so that that way they make like a comparably powered character, not the same level character. This is particularly important for elves who are basically fighters and magic users at the same time, but have a much steeper experience point progression than anybody else. But listen, it's really fast to make a character, and I would be prepared at the start with a 1-sheet thing, like a handout that you've given them that's how to make a character. Tell them all your house, have like a 1-sheet that's the house rules, so they know what that is. Say, look, go into another room if you need to, make a new character. It should take about 10-15 minutes. As soon as you're done, bring it back in. Tell us what the class is. Tell us the character's name. And let them get into the action as soon as possible. Because I think the thing is that it's not fun if your PC can't die. It's just not exciting, right? You have to let that PC die. As hard as it may be, as sad as you may feel, you need to let the PC die. It's a learning experience, and it may suck, but the good news is they can make a new character. But, in addition to that, just make it as easy as possible for them to come in as quickly as possible with something new. And tell them that they can flesh it out later. Like if you're using the skill system in the rules cyclopedia, pick your skills later. Like all we need is a name, a class, like your hit points, like, tell them they can have whatever equipment makes sense given the level, like, if the other if the other people who wear plate mail have plate mail, let them, and they're making a fighter, let them have plate mail. Whatever, just like come up. Don't let them have magic. I would not let them have magic items, but I'll let them, just come up with, a comparable character and just bring it in, because the idea is it sucks your character died, but you can bring this new character in as soon as you're ready. And here are a few bonus tips. Okay. One is, I would not let them just buy magic items or buy healing potions even. Let them go on adventures to get that. It seems like it's sort of a WotC thing to let them just like buy magic items. I feel like old school D&D had lower magic universes. Magic was rarer. And I kind of feel like it kind of spoils things to let them buy magic items. Let them earn that. Don't let them start out with magic items, except for the hints I already gave. Like, let them start out with some healing potions and some single shot things, some scrolls and stuff maybe. But don't let them just like come in with a bunch of permanent magic items, right? Even if they're coming in at a higher level, okay. Also let them have a background. Even if you're not using the skill system, let them pick a background, but don't let them come up with a crazy backstory. Like, it should be something simple. It could be something really cool, like my parents were killed by ogres, and I was orphaned and I was raised by a knight in the woods or something. I don't know. I just made that up, but like it could be something cool. But the key to backgrounds is do not let them have had any adventures before the start of the game. Their life was boring, more or less, until they started, because this is your story, right? But at the same time, allow them to make use of that background. Don't give them extravagant backgrounds. Don't let them be like, yeah, I'm the son of the Duke or something. But let them, or don't be like, oh yeah, like I was like I found a sword in a stone, and it was like this magic sword with these special powers and stuff. Like, don't pull that on you. But if they grew up on a farm, let them do stuff with farming if it makes sense. Like if they grew up in some background where they can fix a wagon wheel, let them fix a wagon wheel. Let them use that. It anchors the character in the story. It means that that their character is like not just a class. They are like a real person who was doing something before they became that class, right? And it means that every character is like a little bit unique. Like, one fighter was raised by farmers, another fighter was raised by blacksmiths, another fighter was raised by fishermen, right? So backgrounds should be there to anchor them in the world and give them like little things that they can do that might be kind of nifty and neat and fun, not to overpower them. Right? And so kind of let them, like, remember, this is a game of thinking outside the box, and sometimes if your background is like, I was raised by carpenters, there's a bunch of wood here, could I build a little wooden thing? And we could use that, like, to do something with those orcs down the stairs. Let them do that. Like, that's cool, So those are your bonus tips. And above all, have fun. Let your players experience the blood and thunder of old school D&D with the heart-pounding dungeon crawls. Don't try to kill them, but let them feel the danger of it. Okay? So Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope these are useful tips. Tell me in the comments politely what your thoughts are. What do you think these are useful tips? If you've been gaming for a long time, have you run a game or have you used these tips or something like them, and were they useful? What are your tips if you've been playing BECMI for a long time that you would say? And it's fine if you disagree with me. I encourage dialogue. But let's keep it polite and be friendly with each other, because we're here to help each other, not to, be jerks online. Okay? So, without further ado, happy dreaming, everybody.